So Gail Rubin, in Thinking Sex, like I said, I pulled the worst, not necessarily the worst quotes. It's actually worth reading start to finish if you have a couple of hours. It will pollute your mind, but it's very illustrative. This is what she writes. I want to read a little bit of this. She said, disputes over sexual behavior often become the vehicles for displacing social anxieties and discharging their attendant emotional intensity. Consequently, sexuality should be treated with special respect in times of great social stress. She says sex is always political. So what does that say? Right off the bat, this is the first page. This is one of the first paragraphs. She says, this founder of queer theory says that sex is always political. So sex is a political weapon. We see that. We see that these children are being indoctrinated in queer theory to beget a political agenda. And the woman who wrote the founding document admits this. This is very telling. So this is not then about inclusion. This is not about tolerance. This is not about anti-bullying. This is not about helping children be their authentic selves. This is about none of that. Sex is political. So says the founder of queer theory. Then she goes on to say, and this is where it gets really twisted. She goes on to talk about the sexualization of children. And instead of talking about it as a negative thing, which the vast, vast, vast majority of the American public believe, she is in favor of the sexualization of children. She says, quote, the notion that sex per se is harmful to the young has been chiseled into extensive social and legal structures designed to insulate minors from sexual knowledge and experience. For over a century, no tactic for stirring up erotic hysteria has been as reliable as the appeal to protect children. The current wave of erotic terror, remember she's writing in the 1980s, has reached deepest into those areas bordered in some way, if only symbolically, by the sexuality of the young. The motto of the Dade County repeal campaign was Save Our Children from Alleged Homosexual Recruitment. From February 1977, shortly before the Dade County vote, a sudden concern with child pornography swept the national media. In May, the Chicago Tribune ran a lurid 4-day series with 3-inch headlines, which claimed to expose a national vice ring organized to lure young boys into prostitution and pornography. Newspapers across the country ran similar stories, most of them worthy of the National Enquirer. So even this is the introductory paragraph to this. What is she doing? She is belittling child pornography. She is belittling children being forced into prostitution, and she is advocating for the sexualization of children. And this is just the introduction. This is not even the outright advocacy for pedophilia. She goes, although the Supreme Court has also ruled that it is a constitutional right to possess obscene materials for private use, some childhood pornography laws prohibit even the private possession of any sexual material involving minors. Like what? What? She's actually making an argument from a constitutional standpoint that someone should be allowed to have the private possession of materials that depict the sexual abuse and torture of children? This is the woman who wrote the founding document on queer theory, the principles of queer theory being taught to your children in public school today. She's actively advocating that individuals should be able to possess privately in their own home child pornography. She says, the laws protected by the child porn panic are all ill-conceived and misdirected. They represent far-reaching alterations in the regulation of sexual behavior and abrogate important sexual civil liberties. Oh, so now it's a civil liberty to be able to consume material in which a child is being sexually tortured and abused. This is disgusting. But hardly anyone, she writes, noticed as they swept through Congress and state legislatures, with the exception of the North American Man-Boy Love Association and American Civil Liberties Union, no one raised a peep of protest. Do you know what the North American Man-Boy Love Association is? It's a group of pedophiles. It's the lobbying organization of pedophiles. Grown men who want it to be legal for them to sexually abuse young children, young boys. The only organization, aside from the ACLU, who raised a peep about child pornography laws was pedophiles. She goes on to say, it's harder for most people to sympathize with actual boy lovers. Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult to find defenders for their civil liberties, let alone for their erotic orientation. Consequently, the police have feasted on them. Local police, the FBI, and watchdog postal inspectors have joined to build a huge apparatus whose sole aim is to wipe out the community of men who love underage youth. How disgusting is it to use the word love? A community of men who love underage youth? No, 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 no. A community, no. A cohort of pedophiles, a cohort of criminals who sexually abuse children is how you describe that. Not a community of men who love underage youth. A cohort of criminals who abuse children, sexually abuse children. She writes, in 20 years or so, when some of the smoke has cleared, it will be much easier to show that these men have been the victims of a savage and undeserved witch hunt. The pedophiles are the victims of a witch hunt. The pedophiles. No thought for the children. None. The pedophiles she's defending. Look into the future, she tells us, and we'll feel better about pedophiles. A lot of people, she writes, will be embarrassed by their collaboration with this persecution, but it will be too late to do much good for those men who have spent their lives in prison. Gail Rubin, author of the founding document of queer theory, is actively advocating on behalf of pedophiles. This is so important for conservatives to understand as we wage this fight against the transgender ideology in our public schools. Exactly like we did with critical race theory, we brand this as parents versus a hideous sexual agenda, which is what it is. It's not a right versus a left issue. It's not Republican versus Democrat. It's parents protecting their children. And then secondarily, we understand the origin of what is being taught. We understand the origin of queer theory. We understand the true motivations of those who actually formulated this ideology. Defense of pedophiles in her own words. In her own words.